This is Adelaide's FIVEAA.
The return to school will not trigger a COVID second wave. 6 more people have died and just over 3,000 cases have been recorded, a drop on yesterday. But hospitalisations continue to rise, as does the number of people in ICU. The Premier says there's further evidence we're at the peak here in SA and people will be urged to slowly return to work after Australia Day. And he says the health advice is providing free rats to old teachers would be unhelpful unless they're at close contact.
We will be providing surveillance testing for teachers in that early learning environment, so preschools and childcare, and so they will be having tests provided to them for Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays, but there will be no further tests or surveillance required across our school settings for teachers or for students.
Teachers are considering strike action over the return to school plan. Federal Labor is defending a decision to keep the West Australian border closed indefinitely. Premier Mark McGowan will no longer reopen his state to the rest of the country on the 5th of February. Mr McGowan says concern over the spread of Omicron influenced his decision. The opposition's Richard Marles believes his colleague is making the right move.
I think you can understand the decision that Mark McGowan has made. I mean, he's looking over at the East Coast. He's seeing that you can't find rapid antigen tests. There are supermarket stores without food on the shelves. There are labour shortages right across the economy. That's what Mark McGowan is seeing.
There's been a serious incident involving CFS crew in the state's southeast. At least one person has been seriously injured in the accident involving a fallen tree at Lucendale. A fire has been burning in the area since yesterday. British military presence in Australia will be expanded as tensions rise in the Indo-Pacific. Annual defence and security talks between Australian and British authorities have been held today. Growing strategic challenges and the need to strengthen economic security in the region dominated discussion. Defence Minister Peter Dutton says providing stability is key.
More people that understand what is happening in terms of the coercion and the bullying that's taking place within the Indo-Pacific. So there are many countries who have that interest in making sure that they have a presence. I think what you'll see is a greater regularity in visits, in training.
The first of the Big Four banks has increased fixed rates this year. Westpac and its subdivisions have increased their rate by 0.2%. The US Reserve Bank is expected to raise its rates faster than previously thought. Now turning to FIVEAA Sport.
Sliding door scraping and dragging? Fix it yourself. Hit rollerco.com.au for all the parts. This Australian Open tennis update thanks to the super fast charging all-electric Kia EV6.
Victoria Azarenka is through to the 4th round of the Australian Open after a straight sets victory over Elina Svitolina. Barbara Krejcikova defeated Jelena Ostapenko in 3 sets. Ash Barty will take on 30th seed Camilla Giorgi for a place in the round of 16. The world number 1 says she's well acquainted with the Italian's game.
I think it's going to be another match with some fresh challenges, but having played her before, she kind of knows my game, I kind of know hers, and it's about going out there and trying to do it as good as I can.
The future of West Coast Eagles star Jack Darling is in doubt after he failed to meet today's COVID-19 vaccination deadline. Kmart Johnson reports.
Darling is now banned from training with his teammates and attending the club's facilities after he failed to comply with the vaccination mandate. Under the AFL's policy, all players and staff at the 2 WA clubs must have had their first dose administered by today. Darling must now train alone. The Eagles say he is taking time to assess his future and remain optimistic that he will return to the club. Unless the 29-year-old gets vaccinated, he will be ineligible to play in the AFL. Darling's loss is significant. He's been the club's leading goal kicker on 4 occasions and he was a crucial part of the Eagles' 2018 premiership team.
And Cricket Australia has rejected the Sydney Sixers' application for Steve Smith to play in the Big Bash finals. The series kicks off tonight with the Adelaide Strikers up against the Hobart Hurricanes. Now checking 5AA traffic.
At Goodwood, got urgent sewer works, Goodwood Road near Victoria Street. Marion, urgent electrical works there, Marion Road near Allawina Avenue. Sturt got Stobie Pole works there, Seacombe Road near Diagonal Road, that's affecting both directions. And Bowden, expect delays on Hawker Street near Park Terrace, that's due to closures on Torrens Road. Cameras today, got a few of them about Maryvale Road, Athelston, North-South Motorway, Waterloo Corner, and Anzac Highway in the Parklands. Maximise your investment property with Turner Real Estate. Receive an instant estimate of how many potential tenants match your property today at turnerrealestate.com. Adelaide's most accurate traffic on 5AA.
Now the 5AA forecast. Partly cloudy this afternoon, 35. Partly cloudy tomorrow, 33. Sunday a shower or two, 28. And Monday partly cloudy, 29. Right now it's 32. Now let's hear what's happening on 9 News Tonight.
The latest on a serious incident in the state's southeast. CFS volunteers seriously injured while battling a blaze. Workers given a date to start returning to the office. The AFP on the tails of those selling a rat rip-off. See the pictures as record rains hit the state's west and how a simple supplement is helping diabetes sufferers. I'm Kate Collins. See the full story on 9 News Tonight at 6.
Jade Robran on 1395, Adelaide's 5AA.
So coming up on the show a little later, the Education Union will join us to give us their review of the Premier's back to school COVID plan. And also we're going to talk to a leading specialist in Melbourne who says some AFL players will never be the same again after contracting COVID. And, Perth, they're shut. WA, sorry, no one's coming in. We're going to talk to Perth Lord Mayor Basil Zempilas about the announcement from their Premier, Mark McGowan, that he's keeping the borders there in WA firmly shut. How has that affected you guys out there? Have you got family members that you've been dying to see for, years? Could be weeks. We had that slight little opening there when the grand final was on. I know a lot of people jumped over and saw Perth. I'm like, gosh, it's like COVID doesn't even exist here. They've got in their own little utopia. It's, life is normal. And that's the way Mark McGowan wants to keep it. My hairdresser, she's from Perth and she's had a baby in the last 6 months, and her poor mum who lives in WA, she's seeing her grandchild just, grow up on FaceTime. There's so many hard luck stories out there. It's awful. So if this has hit you today, please call in and let us know, 8223 0000. But as I said, we'll talk to the Lord Mayor, Basil Zempilas, very, very soon. But now, my next guest is a documentary maker, renowned British doctor, author and trusted medical journalist. And he's got some tips for us for a happy, healthy new year. And I love this guy because he even says if you don't like the gym, don't worry. You might have watched him put his body on the line in the SBS documentary series Australia's Health Revolution with Dr. Michael Mosley. He was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and rather than fight it with drugs, he decided to tackle the disease and won with a good diet. And he's now just released a new book called The Fast 800 Keto. Welcome to the program, Dr. Michael Mosley.
Thank you very much. Good to be with you.
Now, new year, new you. That's what many of us start the year saying. Do you even fall victim to that? Do you kick off the year wanting to lose a few kilos or kickstart a diet?
Yeah, actually, this year I decided to preempt it. And I put myself on my own diet, the Fast 800 Keto, before Christmas, because I'd noticed that, or at least my wife told me I'd begun snoring again, and my belt was a bit tight. So I put myself on it, and I lost about 4 kilos in just under 2 weeks. And that got my blood pressure down and my blood sugars down, and mercifully I stopped snoring as well. So I kind of preempted it this year.
That's very cool to be able to say, hey, I started my own diet.
Absolutely. And the reason is because I write these books and I do base them on a lot of science, but I also think it's a good idea to test run them. So I did test run it earlier in the year, but you mentioned that series and the Health Revolution, and it was about helping 8 Australians reverse their type 2 diabetes and their pre-diabetes by getting them to lose weight on a rapid weight loss diet. And as part of that, I actually decided to put myself on a junk food diet, and I put on about 3 kilos, 3 to 4 kilos, and then I shed them again by putting myself on the Fast 800 Keto, just to, test it out and see how well it would stand up. And I have to say, the nice thing about this new diet is that it's suppresses hunger. So when you go into a state of ketosis, then what happens is that suppresses your hunger hormones, and so it makes it much easier to stick to. Plus, you start to burn fat almost immediately, which is a good thing.
I have done a ketosis diet and it's actually quite phenomenal. But for those that don't know about ketosis and what keto diet is all about, can you explain what this new Fast 800 keto diet is?
Sure. So in a keto diet, normally we're like a hybrid car. We run on a mixture of sugar and fat. And mainly it's sugar in the form of glucose, which is stored in your blood and also in your liver and your muscles. And when you go on a very low-carb diet, and that means typically less than 50 grams of carbs a day, then your body is forced to burn through its fat supplies. And the way it does that is by using something called ketone bodies. It converts the fat stores into ketone bodies, and it burns those and uses those as fuel. And that's why it's known as going into ketosis. And you can detect the presence of these ketone bodies with, you have a slight sort of smelly breath. Not exactly smelly, but it smells a bit like nail polish remover, my wife says.
Wow.
And you can also use, yes, and that is and we've known about the benefits of ketones and ketosis for about 100 years. But it was originally developed, this diet, in 1921 in the U.S. as a way of treating kids with epilepsy, but we now have discovered it has other benefits. So a standard keto diet is not calorie restricted. I've added another dimension to it. I've introduced intermittent fasting, and that seems to accelerate the whole process. So you go into ketosis faster, and you start burning through the fat even faster. But I've created a sort of 3-stage program, because as anybody, you've done a keto diet, it's really good for losing weight, but it's difficult to stick to long term.
Well, it is, because it's very rich, isn't it? So when they say you can have milk, you can have full cream milk. When you have cheese, it's the full fat cheese. It almost goes against everything that you're grown up being told. You know, try and eat low fat, low cal. But this is really rich in taste and flavour. And I was able to stick to it for a fairly long time because I love my food and I was able to experiment with it. But you're right, it can be difficult to stick to it. Why is that?
Well, I think it's just because there are lots of lovely carbs under. There are good fats and bad fats. So broadly speaking, what I'm recommending is, I like full fat milk, and there's a lot of evidence now that there are lots of sort of benefits to that we used to think that all saturated fats are bad. Now we realize there are actually some pretty good ones. So I'm a big fan of full-fat Greek yogurt, and I eat butter rather than margarine. But also I like olive oil, avocados, and oily nuts, oily fish, which are really good sources of fat. But in addition, there are, carbs which are harder to resist. I think, I love rice, I like potatoes, I like bread, I love bread. And so it's very difficult to cut those out of your diet entirely or for very long. So I sometimes explain it to people by saying it's a bit like playing golf. You don't use the same club all the way around. You start off with wood, then you use an iron, and then you finish with a putter. And the same is true, I guess, of this diet. You go for the rapid weight loss to begin with, then you introduce what I call intermittent fasting, and then you sort of graduate to something I would describe as a Mediterranean-style diet, which is kind of healthiest diet on the planet. So you're eating plenty of healthy carbs in the forms of, green veg and also legumes, and, you can start digging into the rice and potatoes then. But the initial stage is very low carb to put you into ketosis, to get that fat burning going, to suppress the hunger. And after you've done that for about, up to 12 weeks, then you start to go to a more sort of moderate diet, I'd describe it as. So you can do it just as a sort of quick hit like I did before Christmas. You've got 4 kilos to lose. Or some people use it to lose significant amounts of weight and perhaps to reverse their type 2 diabetes or perhaps, knock on the head pre-diabetes or high blood pressure. So I see it as a tool to do different things depending on what your ambitions are.
And you're saying that you can lose 6 kilos in 21 days. That's a big number.
Yeah, there is. I mean, I did a series for here in the BBC for Channel 4, and we called the series Lose a Stone. A stone is 14 pounds, which is just over 6 kilos, about 6.5 kilos. And indeed, I got my contributors, my 5 contributors. They were ranging age from 30 to 55, and I put them on this diet, and they did indeed hit that target. Some lost more weight than others, but yeah, that's what they did. And it's some people will not manage that, and it's not suitable for everyone. I'd recommend you go and check out my website, thefast800.com, to discover if you're suitable and to learn a bit more about the science.
Well, I find it very interesting, the 5-2 diet. I know a lot of people that have been on the 5-2 diet. I've been reluctant because I love my food, and I think I'd really struggle not eating for two of those days. But does that actually mean not eating at all?
No, not at all. So the reason I came up with the 5-2 diet back in 2012, and the reason I did that is because I had type 2 diabetes and I wanted to reverse it. And I came across all this scientific research on intermittent fasting. So no, you cut down your calories to around 800 calories, and you do that for a couple of days a week. So people seem to like it because it meant they weren't permanently on the diet. And people like you who love their food, they could eat, what they wanted in moderation on the other 5 days, but so just for 2 days a week they cut back. And many people found that much easier to do than to be, if you like, permanently on a diet. Plus, there are some sort of other advantages to what I call intermittent fasting. So fasting sounds difficult, but actually it's about 800 to 900 calories, so it's not starvation at all.
I'd love to talk to you about these people that were suffering from diabetes because, look, don't get me wrong, we all want to lose a bit of weight to look good, but I think as you get older you realise you want to lose weight because you want to live longer, you want to live a happier life. And a lot of the doctors will say, well, here, take these pills, they'll lower this or they'll fix this, but not everyone wants to pill pop like yourself, so you put yourself on this diet and it turned your life around. How about others? What did it do for others? How did it change their lives?
Sure. So there's quite a lot of scientific studies, indeed, some very compelling scientific studies now, which demonstrate that if you do a rapid weight loss diet, what I would call the Fast 800 approach, then in around 50% of people who have type 2 diabetes, they're able to get their blood sugars back into the normal range.
That's great.
And without medication. And the evidence has been so compelling here in the UK that the NHS, our National Health Service, are rolling it out currently in around 5,000 patients. And certainly we saw when I did the Australian Health Revolution, a number of the people there, people with type 2 diabetes, but also people with pre-diabetes, because around a third of adult Australians have pre-diabetes, which means their blood sugars are raised, but not yet in the diabetic range. And unless you've been tested, you almost certainly won't know. So it's always worth, particularly if you have a family history or if you have a bit of a larger tummy, getting your blood sugars tested and seeing if they are in healthy range. If they're not, then the sooner you get on with doing something about it, the better. Because type 2 diabetes is a very nasty disease. My dad developed it about the same age that I was when I was diagnosed. I was in my mid-50s back in 2012. And he was the same, and he followed his doctor's advice, took medication, but he died of complications of diabetes at the age of 74, which included heart failure and dementia. So this is not a nice disease, and it's something to be aware of. And it's part, there are things like high blood pressure and high blood fats, which also go along with it.
Well, it's incredible what can be controlled by a diet, isn't it? I said it's quite amazing what you can control by a diet.
Oh, 100%. And that, I think, is something which is, doctors are beginning to learn. It wasn't something I was taught at medical school, but which is becoming clearer and clearer. And we also know, the thing I would say is if you are currently on medication, particularly, you should go and talk to your doctor before embarking on any sort of diet, because one of the things that will happen on the fast 800 keto is you lose a lot of weight fast, but also your blood pressure will come down, your blood sugars will come down, and the danger is you'll be over-medicated. So it is very advisable to talk to your doctor before embarking on any such thing. That's a note of caution, I'd say.
Very smart. We talked about sugar. We talked about sugar just then, and I mean, we all know sugar's bad and you should stay away from it, but I read in your book what I find really interesting and what I don't think a lot of people know is breakfast. That can really get you, can't it, with the sugars?
It can, yeah, because a lot of people obviously eat breakfast cereals and things like that, or feed their kids those, and unfortunately they tend to be very high in sugar. So some breakfast cereals are up to a third, almost a half sugar. And so personally, I prefer going for a sort of protein-rich breakfast, something like scrambled eggs or boiled eggs or things like that. In the book, there are lots of recipes for things, including keto pancakes, and those are based around almonds and cream cheese. The recipes I say in the book are all created by my wife, Dr. Claire Bailey, who's a GP, and she's working with a nutritionist to create sort of menus and recipes which are sort of healthy but also tasty and very simple to do. So I've eaten them all, I've tested them all, and they're great.
So when she tells you that the belt's getting a little bit tight, you really have to listen to her, don't you?
Exactly. Time to do something about it. So, yeah. And if you want to check out some of her recipes, you can also find her on Instagram under Dr. Claire Bailey. So she has quite a big Australian following. So, yeah, and you can see her cooking and occasionally me popping up and tasting things and offering advice.
Oh, what a power couple. Dr. Michael Mosley, thank you very much for joining the program.
Pleasure. Thanks a lot.
5AA's afternoon show is streaming live right now. Check it out. Head to the 5AA live stream on Facebook, YouTube, or at 5AA.com.au.
Hi, Bronte Manuel from Toop and Toop. It's holiday season, but now's not the time to sit back if you're thinking of selling your home. Adelaide prices continue to hit record highs. The opportunity to maximise the value of your home has rarely been stronger. Buyers aren't spending their break just eating turkey. They're proactively trying to secure their next property, and quickly. We've been helping Adelaide buyers and sellers for almost 40 years. So if you'd like to know how much your home might be worth in this current hot market, go to toop.com.au.
It may not be that exciting to learn that Playford Pavers are one of the few companies that still make their own pavers on site. Riveting, isn't it? But what if I told you that because Playford Pavers make their own pavers for driveways, entertaining areas and pathways, you pay a lot less? How good is that? Pay less at Playford Pavers. Visit playfordpavers.com.au.
Australia's making positive energy and there's more on the way. It's all part of our plan to reach net zero by 2050. We're rolling out rooftop solar at record levels. Expanding snowy hydro, so it's the biggest battery in the southern hemisphere, and investing billions in projects like hydrogen hubs and seaweed for feed, which means more jobs and even less emissions, helping us reach net zero by 2050. Find out more at positiveenergy.gov.au. Authorised by the Australian Government, Canberra.
I think one of the lessons for Australia and Australians is we're not as tough as we thought we were, but we are more resilient than we think we are.
A Fire Inside. Streaming on 9 now. Made possible by NRMA Insurance.
If you need a window, and not just anything will do, just call Statesman Windows. Factory direct to you.
Nobody beats Statesman Windows, not on quality and certainly not on service. Windows, sliding doors, bifolds and more. Made right here in Adelaide. Factory direct to you. For windows when and where you want them, call Statesman Windows. States.com.au.
Windows when and where you want them. Windows when and where you want them.
How good does beer sound? But as good as it sounds, it's actually the stuff you can't hear that makes this beer a Cooper's. Every drop contains passion and dedication to always use the finest ingredients and best brewing techniques. It's what we've been doing right here in SA for 160 years. And it's this stuff that will always make Cooper's forever original. Roll into Sip and Save and roll out with a Sweet Surf hat. Available now with original Pale Ale 375ml cans.
$13.95, Adelaide's 5AA. This is Jade Robran.
Well, WA Premier Mark McGowan said he'd be reckless and irresponsible if he opened up his state. He has kept the borders slammed shut indefinitely, and Lord Mayor Basil Zemplis, and my former Channel 7 workmate, joins us on the line. Hello, my friend. How are you, Basil?
Hi, Jade. Nice to chat, and hello to everybody in Adelaide.
Well, it's going to be a long time till we actually get to see you. How has this decision gone down?
It does feel that way, doesn't it? Look, the Premier has enjoyed a great deal of support over the last 2 years, and most West Australians have been very supportive of his tough stance on the borders. There's no doubt, though, that there are a growing number of Western Australians who are frustrated and I think disappointed by last night's announcement. I would say, Jade, in my opinion, not going off any polls, but certainly taking the temperature of the city on radio this morning and through other avenues that I'm involved in, I think more West Australians still support the stance that the Premier has put in place, but it's clear there's a growing number who are very frustrated about the borders not opening up.
That does not surprise me at all. And I'd love to ask how business in the city is. And I ask that because we, like Perth, just a few weeks ago, had no COVID. People were living normally, going out and about, shopping, eating out. It was a real bustling city here in Adelaide. And now our CBD is literally a ghost town and businesses are suffering really badly. Omicron has scared so many people off. We've seen what happened in Melbourne. So I guess you've got to be careful what you ask for. I feel like a couple of people in South Australia would have wished we kept our borders shut.
No, and absolutely, and that's a very valid point. And the argument that you've just put forward then, or the circumstances that you've described in Adelaide, I guess in a sense, is exactly what led to the Premier making the announcement that he did yesterday. However, there is also the view that there is an inevitable go backwards before we go forward that is going to happen when we eventually open up. And 5 weeks ago, we were told we would be opening up on February 5, and everybody has been preparing themselves for what was to come. Now, that inevitability, if you like, that almost certainty that the virus will get in and that people will be off work and that people will start to struggle with the normal day-to-day routine for a period, that has been put off. And if it's going to come at some point, then aren't we better off just bringing it on so that we can get through the worst of it and start to move forward? And I think that's where there's a frustration today across here. If it is going to happen anyway, are we perhaps better off bringing it on? But the Premier's decision is no, that's not the case for the time being. And I guess only time will tell if that is the right call.
Well, and Basil, everyone was asked to go out and get double vaccinated. He now wants everyone to be triple vaccinated. I think you're only around the 20%, so there's a long way to go. And I guess the question is, well, when will you open up? And if you do get to that, that number of 90% triple vax, will you actually stick to your word? Because you keep going back on it.
They're very valid points. So we're at 25% now. How long is it going to take to get to between 80 and 90% that he said last night we're going to need triple vax? And even if we get there, how do we know that the ground rules aren't going to change again? So that's the uncertainty that West Aussies are confronted by at the moment.
And so absolutely no idea when he's going to open up?
We really don't know. And unfortunately, I suppose, for the Premier, 5 weeks ago, having laid out an opening date of February 5, and then last night announcing that we won't be sticking to February 5, it meant that last night he couldn't revise that date because clearly he doesn't want to have that situation where he's going to have to, at some point, perhaps, say again, no, we can't stick to that one either. And I think that has just contributed to the uncertainty. So as I say, Jade, and I don't want to misrepresent, there's a lot of West Australians still very supportive of the Premier's announcement last night. And before the announcement, there were lots of people saying it would be crazy to open up. Why let it in? Why have what's happening over there come over here? but there was clearly a growing number who said, okay, it's time now. It's time we learn to live with it. Let's do it cautiously and safely, perhaps in stages, but let's start to move forward. And unfortunately, that moving forward, which may be met with an inevitable backwards before we go forward, has been delayed, and we just don't know when that process starts.
Basil, thank you so much. And putting our sports hats on, goodness knows what's going to happen with the AFL season with West Coast and Dockers. It sounds like they're going to be back into a bubble, which is really unfair for families and the clubs as well that stand to lose millions of dollars throughout a season.
Look, the AFL are in a privileged position, but there's no doubt when it boils down on that very personal level, to be separated from partners and children for a long period of time is difficult. And, it's been tough in the AFL for the last couple of years. This season seems like the toughest to put together on paper. And right now, West Coast and Fremantle would have to be, I would have thought, based on the East Coast for most of the season if these conditions remain.
Looks that way. Basil Zemplis, Perth Lord Mayor, thank you so much for your time. We're going to head into the newsroom. You're listening to Adelaide's 5AA.
This is Adelaide's 5AA.
Good afternoon, I'm Michaela Kamarek. 6 South Australians with COVID have died in the last 24 hours, while over 3,000 new cases have been recorded. 2 firefighters have been seriously hurt in an incident involving a CFS truck in the state's southeast. Another 12,000 Australian visas will be offered to Afghan nationals fleeing the strife-torn country, and Ash Barty will take on 30th seed Camilla Georgie for a place in the round of 16 at the Australian Open. Partly cloudy this afternoon, 35. Right now it's 32. More news at 4 o'clock and As It Happens on 5AA.
If you're looking for a new local, you know, the kind where you can get all your shopping done, where you don't have to spend all your time looking for a park. The kind where you can pick up presents, do the weekly shop, and stock up on seafood and small goods. Look to Newton Central. With a newly renovated Drake's, Barossa Fine Foods, Seafood Works, Target, and many more shops, Newton Central is set to become your new local. Newton Central, Gorge Road, Newton.
This is RB Day with more tales from the bedroom, thanks to Supercraft Bedding. It's true we custom make mattresses of all shapes and sizes with the best local materials, especially for aged care and NDIS clients. But when one customer asked for a mattress for their bedroom, the whole room wall to wall, well, okay. We care about what goes in it, not what happens on it. This is RB Day for Supercraft Bedding, building better beds at 42 Richmond Road, Keswick.
What if your next holiday was always parked just outside the front door? Dave Benson Caravans sell your next holiday, and unlike an expensive overseas holiday, your dollar remains as an asset, your caravan. With over 120 new or used caravans and campers on display under one roof, the DBC Caravan Professionals can tailor your next family holiday to your lifestyle and needs. Your Australian journey awaits and begins at Dave Benson Caravans, 64 Grand Junction Road, Kilburn.
For radio lovers, it all adds up. You make us laugh. You make us sing. Connect us all to everything. And even when our day's gone wrong, you'll play that song and we'll move on. It all adds up. And now there's even more for us. Extra stations, in fact 20 plus. All our favourites will still be found, but the difference now is digital sound. Free from fuss and free for us. There's more radio to love on DAB+.
As a business owner, it's not just about working harder, it's about working smarter. Like using the new CommBank Smart Terminal. Its dual SIM and Wi-Fi means you're always ready to take a payment. And its 1.1% flat rate transaction fee means you pay less when customers pay you. That's smart. Search CommBank Smart Terminal. Can lives here. Eligibility criteria, fees apply. For full T's and C's, visit commbank.com.au/smart terminal.
Right now, SA Ambulance Service has never been busier.
000 ambulance emergency.
So I was fishing on a boat and the hook is stuck in my nose.
But every day, 000 receives more and more trivial calls.
My husband fell down and he's broken his big toe.
Stopping them from getting to the real emergencies.
I've got a really bad jaw pain from brushing my teeth too hard.
For non-emergencies, visit the Health Direct website and save 000 for when it matters.
Jade Robran on 13.95, Adelaide's 5AA.
It's 25 minutes to 4 o'clock. I hope you're enjoying your Friday afternoon. Thank you very much for joining the program. And thanks to those, as I wave to you, that have jumped on for our live stream. You can jump onto Facebook or YouTube and watch the show live. And also the sports show coming up after 4 o'clock is also on camera as well. Got a couple of text messages that have come through regarding WA closing their borders. Jade, I would have to say the WA Premier is unable to cope with any dramas. He is controlling by fear, very unhealthy. Thank you, Wendy. Now, about half of the players in the AFL have tested positive in the past few weeks to COVID, and I know about 20 personally. Some just had the sniffles, but 2 that I know got it really badly. They were fully vaccinated and they got the full-blown everything, the chills, headaches, aches, pains, sore throat, struggling to breathe, and it was the whole shebang. Now, there are some of the country's youngest and fittest people, but doctors have warned that some may never get back to their 100% selves. Dr. Peter Larkins is a top medico in Melbourne who works alongside footballers and has so for many years, a top specialist in sport and exercise, and joins us on the line. Dr. Pete, great to have you on the show. How are you?
Hi, Jade. It's been a long time since we've spoken. Hope you're going well.
It has. My knee is holding up. Dr. Pete is also my knee surgeon. So
good job.
I think you've done a few Robrans in your time, haven't you?
I know. Well, it's a very athletic family, as you well know.
Well, it's that, but it's also a family with very bunged knees, as we all know. Anyway, moving right along, I want to ask you about these AFL footballers. So it's been reported that around half of the industry has come down. They're really in that, I guess, that age group that struck it quite hard over New Year's period, and a lot of the players did get it. And from what the word on the street, how badly have they got it?
Well, it varies a little bit depending on their immunity. I mean, right now in the community generally, certainly in the Victorian figures that I saw yesterday from our health department, Jade, it's 20 to 29 age group that really is the big group at the present time. So that sort of fits in the demographic pretty well for elite sports people, doesn't it? But the AFL group, I mean, obviously there's a lot of close contact. There's training sessions. There's, times in rooms together at meetings, travel during the winter. And, it depends on immunity. I mean, there's a requirement to be vaccinated, which we know gives a certain level of protection, and normally you get an antibody resistance, and so your exposure to the virus shouldn't make you as sick as unvaccinated people. In fact, that's a fact.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, as you just alluded to, there are different amounts of reaction in people. Sometimes it's a very mild illness, and there are people in the community, of course, that are on ventilators and intensive care. And so being a respiratory virus for an athlete, even a 5% drop-off on their oxygen capacity or their energy levels has an effect. And there's a thing called long COVID, which we learned about with the alpha virus, Jade, which was where the term came from. So the symptoms don't just go away in a week or 2 weeks, even though it can do that. It's a bit like the concussion story where, players recover from concussion quickly and some are lingering months later with symptoms. And so it is a concern. 50% is 400 people in the AFL family. I mean, that's an enormous amount of the workforce. And, at an elite level of performance, certainly there's 2 things got to happen. One, you've got to be clear of the virus so you don't spread it to your teammates. And secondly, your ability to perform in an aerobic sport like an AFL, it can be affected if you've got respiratory problems. We know that. And
also at this time of year, these young players are pushing themselves to the limit. It's pre-season training. This is the time where they set themselves up for the actual season, and they just simply wouldn't be able to be doing that. Surely, how do you know that if a player has had it and they have recovered, but they're heading back into training, surely they're not just going in at 100%.
No, I think like anything, coming back from a surgery, coming back from a stress injury, you tend to load progressively and you look at the reaction from progressive loading and just see that you don't get a setback. And I think the medical staff would be all over that. As you say, pre-season is so critical. I mean, how often does a player who does well in a year say, I had a good pre-season this time round, I haven't had a good pre-season for 2 years? Well, the pre-season is critical. But it also means pushing yourself, which clearly means your fitness level is coming up because there's a lot less intensive training done match to match from week to week when you're in the middle of the season because you have to recover so much. And again, the problem I see, Jade, going forward in the months ahead is we're heading into winter. And of course, that is when the virus is most prevalent
that's right.
and most likely to spread. So right now we're getting spread during summer weather. which arguably is better weather and things like that. But as we know, this is a winter virus, and the peak usually occurs in the June, July, August period. So we've got a long season ahead, and it certainly you'd hope that whatever measures are put in place, all the things we talked about, hygiene, masks, washing your hands, all those things have to be absolutely critically applied in AFL circles.
And we're really talking about lung capacity here, which, when you're an elite athlete, you need that working at, 100%. How can COVID and long COVID interrupt a player throughout the season? What effects could this have on them?
Yeah, well, it's primarily a respiratory virus, and that's why we talk about ventilators and intensive care and people on oxygen. I mean, it can affect other organs of the body once it takes over in people that are immunocompromised or people that are unwell with cardiac disease or have got other medical conditions. And remember, there are players in the AFL who are diabetic and players that have got other medical conditions that are being treated. So, that, whilst they're fit and healthy, and the other thing I might point out to listeners, Jade, is that, exercise increases your immunity. So being fit actually improves your body from a health point of view, and so immunity is better. But as you say, being a primary respiratory disease, it can have an effect on what we call lung elasticity. The lungs can get more stiff, and so you don't get the oxygen transfer or the so-called VO2 max, which is a term often referred to as an aerobic measure of how fit people are. And, if you're looking at an endurance, an on-baller, or just the intensity of AFL circles, then it's going to make people breathless, it's going to make people fatigued and not recover as well. And then there are players that are describing that at the present time this week. They're talking about their inability to train at high level and the long fatigue symptoms that have persisted for weeks after the virus isn't detectable anymore. So these are things that we don't know for sure. As you say, of your little group that perhaps only 10% are unwell. But if you take 10% of half, the 50%, we're still talking at a very substantial number of players around the clubs.
Absolutely. Well, we also heard Bernard Tomic, he's suffering quite badly. We saw Nick Kyrgios, he had it last week and he's taken back at the elite level and wow, he's achieved incredible things considering, he had COVID as well. But I bet it really frustrates you to hear younger people, maybe not even younger people, but all people, those that come out and say, I'd really like to just go out and get it over and done with.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you're referring to a tweet that I put up, and it was a serious tweet. I came back to work from holidays last week, and I'm seeing patients, even though there's no elective surgery at all out in Victoria, so we've got a very significant COVID impact on medical care over here. But patients were saying to me, Jade, look, I just can't wait to get it over with. And I made a point, and I made a public tweet about it, that don't expect that you're just going to get over it quickly. I mean, what happens if you're one of the people that gets long COVID? What if you're one of the people that has... So it's not just as simple as say, I want to get it. I mean, we should still be vigilant. I mean, I understand, Omicron in South Australia, and, I've just been in Queensland, Jade, and they're really anxious up there because us Victorians, we've had a long experience of doing the tough yards, and we're quite used to it. There was an anxiety around. I mean, South Australia's been better protected than us. But, when we're in the community, it's going to spread, and it's going to spread for months. And there'll be other variants. Omicron's, the vision about Omicron, people saying, it's mild, it's very similar to the Alpha. So we started off we talked about COVID in 2020, Jade, we talked about the Alpha variant, and we were quite scared about it and it put people in hospital. And then Delta came along and it was much more severe. And suddenly Omicron comes along, people say, it's not as bad as Delta, but it's actually quite significant. And so bearing in mind that, Omicron's not as bad as Delta, but it's similar to the Alpha one. And I'm just going through names because we're going to have 2 or 3 more names that you and me are going to have to get our tongues around over the next 12 months, Jade, right? So the issue of saying, I just want to get it, but I mean, I don't see the logic in that completely, honestly. I mean, I understand, many people will be exposed, but you really want to have your resistance up if you can.
Well, it sounds like it's just going to be another year of absolute chaos for Gil and his team, doesn't it? Would you like to see bubbles brought back?
Look, it worked so well in 2020, and hats off to the AFL for getting a 2020 season out of the way. That was a real scramble, and I did a really good session with Bill at our medical leadership dinner at Epworth, where I work, at the end of 2020, and I said, what's the one word that describes what the AFL had to do? And he said flexibility.
Yes. Flexibility.
And so, in 2021, the season was affected, but I think there's a bit more experience, and we still had to go to Queensland for a grand final. Might be in Adelaide this year.
Hope so.
Heaven forbid, in 2022, we thought we'd be on top of it. So there's no question Gil and his team at AFL House will be really sort of scrambling. And, and you can't make decisions about June or July yet because it could change. And so it's going to be a threatened season. There might be a reduction in player groups, I mean, the hub worked well because you isolated everybody, you had testing every day, and you really made it, difficult to deal with the public. I mean, we've seen the BBL affected where teams have had to recruit from lower level, just to get a team on the park to play cricket in the BBL season. You can imagine that might happen if you got 40 on your list and 20 of them are unavailable, like Essendon had a week ago over here.
But then it's crazy, isn't it? Then you tune into the overseas soccer and stadiums are jammed packed and life continues. So you think, oh, goodness gracious me, what's the answer?
Well, I mean, no one knows. I mean, there's so many experts out there and some of the experts are all objecting to each other and giving completely opposite information. So who's the expert? I mean, this is the thing that's been a bit laughable in the whole healthcare thing, and suddenly who would have thought the sexiest profession was an epidemiologist in the healthcare field, Jade? I mean,
I can't wait for the day where I never have to say that word ever again.
Yeah, I know. But, we did epidemiology at medical school and it was a subject you just got over with quickly because you didn't have to think you'd ever use it again. And suddenly, everyone wants to be an epidemiologist or an immunologist or virologist. And so overseas, they've taken the attitude, look, we're just going to get on with life. We'll just go with it. I mean, England did it for a while, but look what happened to England recently. They had an absolute outbreak again. And, Spain did it at one stage. Italy did it. The US did it because they figured their population could cope with it. I mean, I'm not sure there's a correct answer. We've been pretty vigilant here at trying to educate people, and I know it's been restrictive and lockdowns and people have objected. But as you say, it's shoulder to shoulder at the soccer games. But it's not to say that's the correct answer either. But I think people are just sick of the restrictions with life.
Yes.
They want to get on with it. We're in our third year. We're going to live with COVID in the vocabulary, Jade, forever, ever. The same as the flu is there forever, and every year we talk about a different strain. So I don't know the correct answer. I just don't think that the answer is let's all get sick. I think it's more. I think there's a middle ground somewhere. We want crowds at the footy. We want crowds at the cricket. Crowds at the tennis at 50%, as you're probably watching in Melbourne at the moment. So there's still restrictions, but hopefully we'll work it out. But historically, this is something that's going to be studied in 20 years' time by our grandkids.
Oh,
Jade,
isn't
and
it just?
they'll look back and wonder why we made some of these decisions. Seriously, they will.
Oh, we did a segment earlier in the show about in 1976 there was a clairvoyant who said that at midday there's going to be a wave that wipes out Adelaide, and here we are 46 years later having a bit of a laugh about it, and people were calling in today with their stories and having a good old laugh. And I thought, I wonder if in 46 years' time we'll be looking back and telling stories about, oh God, you wouldn't believe it, everyone was living in a bubble, borders were closed, and WA was basically a whole nother country all to themselves, and it is just bizarre.
Oh, well, they've always been another country. They'll accept that, Jade, that's for sure.
We just need to give them another flag now, I think. Now that he's extended the border closure, now you can have your own flag now.
Oh, that's right, yeah. But I feel sorry for the players over there because they've got to deal with, what's going on relative to travel and, for the Crows or Port to travel there or Victorian or Brisbane teams, to travel to. It's going to be a nightmare for the AFL if the stringent requirements for travel stay
Most
in place.
Definitely.
And we're not that far away from the season, of course, as we're talking about. So, no, I don't know that. But there's a saying in medicine, Jade, that, the philosophies of one age become the absurdities of the next. And, so what we're doing at the present time, I often use that in my talks when I'm talking to people about what I know about knees. And I say, what we talk about now in 10 years' time, we'll probably be saying we shouldn't have done that. Yeah. But, the thing is, this COVID thing, this dilemma has really challenged all the experts. And, as I said, whether we've done it rightly or wrongly, we've only done our best intent.
Yeah.
And that's all we can say.
Well, I guess the only good thing that could possibly come out of this is that I guess every player on a list at a club is going to get a shot this season. That's a positive.
Well, as long as it's a close of business today that the three Eagles players have got their final chance to do it. I mean, over here, I'm not aware of anyone. The ones that haven't dropped out, like Liam Jones, sadly. The Grand Prix today have made it very, very strict that no one at all will be allowed into the Grand Prix with any Formula One into Melbourne. And, without vaccination, all the players will be, as you say.
That's the way we're heading.
Well, I mean, I understand it. It's to protect the sport. It's to protect teammates and opposition. And I'm not going to go into the Djokovic case because God knows we've given that enough airtime.
Oh, no, thanks.
No, thanks. But the clear message there was, one player shouldn't be a rise above the threat to the event or the sport, and that was the correct decision in my eyes. So it's the same with AFL. You can have objection. I get that. There can be reasons, and But unfortunately, the sport has to make a decision in the interest of the masses, not of an individual.
Agreed, Dr. Pete. Thank you very much. A great chat as always.
No trouble, Jade.
We'll
Good
chat
luck.
soon. Thank you. That's Dr. Peter Larkin. We're going to take a very short break. You're listening to Adelaide's 5AA.
In 2022, 5AA is inviting you into the studio every afternoon. That's right, you can now log into the 5AA live stream from 3 till 6 p.m. each weekday. To watch, simply head to the 5AA live stream on Facebook, YouTube, or at 5AA.com.au and see what everyone's talking about. The 5AA live stream, now each afternoon with Jade Robran, followed by Roey's Sports Show.
This is the sound of Julian's bargain price vacuum with deep express suction. This is the sound of Julian trying to fix his bargain price vacuum, which infuriates him deeply. Yes, this is the sound of bargain regret. When it comes to the important stuff, like insurance, don't risk it. Go to Amy instead, who offers great value cover you won't regret. Amy does. Before buying insurance issued by AAI Limited Trading as Amy, read the PDS at amy.com.au. TMD also available.
It may be hot, but you can still keep your garden green with Garden Grove. Protect your plants and flowers with shade cloth, retain water with wetting agents and mulching. And when your garden does need a drink, Garden Grove has above and new below ground dripper systems that water your plants right where they need it. All that and great advice. The garden you want is a Garden Grove. Golden Grove.
Garden Grove, the garden that I want.
Phone 8251 1111 for delivery to all areas.
G'day, it's Merv Hughes here. In my day, I loved battling the ponds, but these days, my missus is the enemy. Why? I snore really badly. But she saved the day by sending me for a CPAP direct sleep test. Now, the snoring is gone, I'm refreshed and revitalised.
CPAP Direct, now open at 600 Port Road, Allenby Gardens. From sleep studies to the latest CPAP gear at Adelaide's best prices. Sale on now.
If you snore or wake up tired, head to cpap.com.au.
The story of Australia.
In parts, it is painful.
In parts, it is raw.
In others, it's beautiful.
Inspiring great awe.
It brings us together.
And tears us apart.
We all have our views.
So where do we start?
By listening to each other.
And sharing our part.
We're all part of the story. Australia Day.
You don't have to head south to taste your way around McLaren Vale. Just head north to your pals. Sam and Jamie from Parafield Airport Liquor Store know every drop on the shelf. They can guide you through the McLaren Vale region all under one roof. Whether you're a weekend sommelier or just know you like reds, talk wine with your pals and they'll introduce you to their best McLaren Vale pals. Parafield Airport Liquor Store. Pals, next to Roulette's Tavern, Kings Road, Parafield.
Okadorn Creative Industries is a First Nations business connecting Australia's ancient cultures with today's corporations through Reconciliation Action Plans. A Reconciliation Action Plan is an opportunity to drive change, be a preferred employer, and build a dynamic and diverse team with greater cultural awareness. Okadorn can help you discover how a Reconciliation Action Plan can evolve and enhance your business. Okadorn Creative Industries, okadorn.com.au, bringing your story to life.
Hi, Kurt Pengilly from InXS here, and I'm inviting you to join me in saving the sight of 300,000 Australians living with glaucoma by taking up the Treat Your Eyes 7 Sights in 7 Days challenge this March. Fun and easy, simply find, snap and share 7 awesome sights in your neighbourhood, and you'll be raising funds to take glaucoma out of the picture. The Treat Your Eyes 7 Sights in 7 Days challenge. Sign up today at 7sights.org.au.
$13.95, Adelaide's 5AA. This is Jade Robran.
And I've got Andrew Goll, who is the SA President of the Australian Education Union, on the line. Andrew, thank you very much for calling in. I know you've been absolutely flat out. What is your reaction to the Premier's announcement today of the return to school COVID plan?
Yeah, thanks, Jade. I think in the first instance, for preschools, having the access to rapid antigen testing is an important development for a cohort that haven't been vaccinated. But I'm sure our members in preschools are still going to be greatly anxious about that and contracting the virus. And I think, that's almost as certain in that sector. Similarly, we're really disappointed
I think, with the announcement around schools. When you review where we're at over the last couple of weeks, we still don't have an outcome from the ventilation audit, so we know that there are classrooms for which windows cannot be open. We know the government's position on air filters. We know 100 have gone to period because they can't open the windows there for obvious reasons, but, they've disregarded the use of air filters in a general sense. And of course now we've got, despite, good evidence from people like the Doherty Institute, who recommend rapid antigen testing twice a week for students and staff, this government has backed away from that, even though that's what's happening in Victoria and New South Wales. And so I think and the reason why that's so important is it identifies where that virus is occurring, allows for efforts to be made to limit the spread, and of course, that's what it's all about, slowing the spread according to the Premier. So really this announcement today will result in high levels of infection amongst the student and staff population, and that will give our members huge levels of anxiety and fear, especially those who are pregnant, and especially those who are going home to immunocompromised family members if they're not immunocompromised themselves. So, I think we're going to see significant issues around staffing, and we're going to see significant issues around the delivery of learning programs, and of course possibly duty of care. So we're going to see sites closed over the coming weeks. So it's easier to say it's back to school, but the reality will be is that there will be times when those sites will be closed.
So you feel like you haven't been heard. Is the next step strike action?
Well, look, I just want to qualify that a little. I mean, since we went to our members about industrial action, I'm happy to report that the Education Department has been making efforts Wednesday, Thursday, and indeed today. Those discussions have been positive. We've been dealing with the detail which even goes under what was released today. This is the sort of detail that leaders and of course our classroom teachers and support staff need to see in order to feel even more comfortable. So those talks are progressing. There's a commitment to continue with those next week. But those discussions are going against a backdrop of seeing the virus move through the school population, and we know the impacts of that. And I just hope and pray that we're not going to be in a situation which sees huge levels of illnesses where educators find themselves in hospital, and let's hope that we don't see any deaths from educators as a result of this decision today. And I think for the fear and anxiety that our members are feeling, I reckon there's about 40 working days between now and the state election, and I reckon every single day our members rock up to a school or a preschool, they'll be reminded about how this Marshall government has walked away from making sure that workplaces are safe for students and staff.
Andrew, thank you very much for calling in. We really appreciate your time. That is the show for this Friday afternoon. Thank you very much for your company. Have a fantastic weekend. Bye for now.
Introducing the all-new Kia EV6, our first fully electric high-performance